Commander Jake Morrison sat in the broken command center of Terra Station and stared at the footage that still made him shake. 3 months had passed since the most impossible thing in human history happened, but the videos never got easier to watch. The screens showed the same terrifying scene over and over again. 50,000 alien ships appearing in Earth's sky like deadly stars, their crystal hulls catching sunlight and turning it into weapons of pure terror. The Zephyrian Armada had come from somewhere beyond the edge of known space, bringing with them the combined military might of 847 conquered worlds. Their ships were massive things that looked like living jewels, each one the size of a city and armed with weapons that could crack planets in half. Admiral Lisa Warren had been in charge of Earth's defense fleet when they arrived, and she had exactly 200 ships to fight them with. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity was going to die. Jake remembered that first day when the alien fleet commander spoke to Earth through every television, radio, and computer screen on the planet. The creature looked like a cross between a spider and a crystal formation, with too many eyes that glowed with cold intelligence. It spoke perfect English in a voice that sounded like breaking glass mixed with winter wind. The message was short and terrifying. Surrender in 72 hours or watch your species burn. Captain Ben Rodriguez had been Earth's finest military strategist, and he spent those 3 days running numbers on quantum computers that could process 1 million battle scenarios per second. Every single calculation came back with the same answer: 0.003% chance of human survival. The aliens had technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything humans had ever dreamed of building. Their shields could stop nuclear weapons like raindrops, and their engines could fold space itself to move faster than light. But something strange started happening during those 3 days of waiting. Lieutenant Kate Sullivan was monitoring the deep space sensors when she noticed energy readings that made no sense. Massive power signatures were building up around Earth's moon, but there were no human installations there that could generate that kind of energy. The readings looked like someone was charging up the biggest battery in the solar system, but nobody knew what was doing it or why. Dr. Alex Turner was Earth's leading expert on alien life, and he spent those days studying every piece of information they had about the Zephyrians. What worried him most was not their weapons or their ships, but the reports coming in from observatories around the world. Earth's animals were acting strange in ways that seemed almost intelligent. Flocks of birds were flying in perfect geometric patterns that looked like mathematical equations written across the sky. Whales in every ocean were singing in sequences that matched prime number calculations. Even house cats were positioning themselves in patterns that formed complex geometric shapes when viewed from satellite images. On the second day, every dog on Earth started howling at exactly the same time, creating a sound that could be heard from space. Fish in aquariums began swimming in spirals that matched the golden ratio. Insects formed colonies that looked like circuit boards when photographed from above. It was as if every living thing on the planet was responding to some signal that humans could not detect. Jake had been a junior officer then, working in the communications department when the strangest reports started coming in. Radio telescopes were picking up signals from inside Earth itself, deep underground transmissions that pulsed in rhythm with the planet's magnetic field. Seismologists detected vibrations coming from 12 specific locations around the globe, places that formed a perfect geometric pattern when connected on a world map. The vibrations were too regular to be natural earthquakes, too organized to be random geological activity. On the third day, as the Zephyrian fleet moved into attack formation above Earth's atmosphere, every human being on the planet felt something that had never been felt before. It started as a low humming sound that seemed to come from the ground beneath their feet, a vibration that traveled up through their bones and into their minds. Children stopped crying and looked up at the sky. with expressions of calm understanding. Adults found themselves standing perfectly still, listening to something that was not quite sound and not quite thought. The moment came at exactly 12 noon, Greenwich Mean Time. Admiral Warren was in the middle of transmitting her final message to the Zephyrian fleet, trying one last desperate attempt at negotiation, when every communication system on Earth went silent. Not broken or jammed, but silent in a way that suggested they had been gently turned off by something that understood them better than their creators did. Jake remembered watching the main screen in the command center as the impossible happened. The 50,000 alien ships that had been hanging in Earth's sky like a constellation of death simply were not there anymore. Not destroyed, not retreated, not hidden behind some kind of cloaking device. They had vanished as completely as if they had never existed at all. The transition happened in less than a heartbeat, between one moment and the next, leaving behind empty space where the greatest military force in galactic history had been waiting to destroy humanity. In the hours that followed, every sensor on Earth and in orbit confirmed the same impossible truth. The Zephyrian armada was gone without leaving behind so much as a piece of debris or a trace of radiation. 50,000 ships and 15 million alien soldiers had disappeared as completely as morning mist touched by sunlight. The energy signatures that had been building around the moon faded away. The strange animal behaviors returned to normal, and the deep underground vibrations stopped as if someone had turned off a machine that had been running for a very long time. Jake pushed back from his desk and walked to the observation window that looked out over the rebuilt Terra station. 3 months later, humanity still had no idea what had saved them from certain extinction. The greatest minds on Earth were working around the clock to understand what had happened, but the mystery only seemed to get deeper with every discovery they made. All they knew for certain was that something had been waiting beneath their feet, something old and powerful and protective, something that had decided the Zephyrian armada was not welcome in Earth's neighborhood. The footage ended with Admiral Warren's final transmission cutting off in mid-sentence, her voice replaced by silence that would change the course of human history forever. Captain Danny Hughes walked through the ruins of what used to be the Zephyrian landing zone and tried to make sense of the impossible. 6 weeks had passed since the vanishing, and his investigation team was no closer to understanding what had happened than they were on day 1. The alien fleet had simply stopped existing, leaving behind questions that kept him awake at night and evidence that made no sense. According to every law of physics humanity had ever discovered, his team consisted of the smartest people Earth could find. Leah Susan Clark was a quantum physicist who had been working on experimental technology that could fold space and time like origami. Major Rick Phillips was a former Navy SEAL who had become an expert on ancient civilizations after his military service ended. Together, they were supposed to solve the mystery that the entire scientific community was calling impossible. The investigation had started with simple questions that led to complicated answers. Where had the ships gone, and how had they disappeared so completely without leaving any trace behind? The first discovery came from satellite footage that showed 47 minutes of missing data across every monitoring system on the planet. During those missing minutes, every electronic device on Earth had shut down and restarted at exactly the same time, as if someone had pressed a giant reset button for the entire planet. Dr. Clark spent weeks analyzing the energy patterns that remained after the fleet disappeared. Her instruments detected traces of electromagnetic activity that did not match any known human technology. The readings suggested that something had generated a planet-wide pulse of energy, but the source of that pulse was unlike anything in the scientific literature. The energy had originated from 12 specific points around the globe, and when those points were connected on a world map, they formed a perfect geometric shape called a dodecahedron. The 12 locations were scattered across every continent and ocean, But they all had one thing in common. They were sites where ancient humans had built monuments thousands of years before recorded history began. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Stonehenge in England, the Nazca Lines in Peru, and 9 other places where prehistoric people had moved massive stones into patterns that seemed to serve no practical purpose. Major Phillips had access to classified military files that went back over a century, and what he found in those dusty reports made the mystery even deeper. During World War II, Sergeant Eddie Martinez had filed a report about impossible lights he had seen at one of the sites. In 1987, Dr. Nancy Foster had recorded gravitational anomalies at another location that defied explanation. The pattern suggested that these places had been active for decades, possibly centuries, doing something that nobody understood. The most disturbing discovery came from Captain Helen Davis, who had been flying a reconnaissance mission when the alien fleet vanished. Her flight recorder had captured footage that should not have been possible according to any known science. At the exact moment the Zephyrian ships disappeared, massive structures had emerged from Earth's surface at each of the 12 locations. The structures looked like they were made of light and energy rather than solid matter, and they seemed to bend space itself around the enemy fleet before folding back into the planet as if they had never existed. Dr. Clark studied the footage, frame by frame, using computers that could process millions of calculations per second. The structures appeared to be some kind of technology that could manipulate the fabric of reality itself. They had reached out across thousands of miles of space, surrounded the entire alien fleet, and then compressed that space into something smaller than a pinpoint before disappearing back underground. The energy required for such an operation would be more than the total output of Earth's sun for 1,000,000 years. Hughes assembled his team in the rebuilt command center of Terra Station to discuss their findings. The evidence pointed to a conclusion that seemed impossible but could not be ignored. Something had been hidden beneath Earth's surface for a very long time, something with technology so advanced that it made human science look like stone tools compared to starships. This something had been waiting and watching, and when the Zephyrian fleet had threatened Earth, it had acted to protect the planet. Major Phillips discovered more classified reports from government archives around the world. In 1954, Soviet scientists had detected unusual magnetic readings at one of the sites. In 1973, American researchers had recorded seismic activity that followed mathematical patterns rather than natural earthquake behaviors. In 1996, Japanese satellites had photographed energy discharges from another location that were explained away as atmospheric phenomena. The pattern was clear to anyone who looked at all the evidence together. Earth had been protected by something that humanity had never known existed. The 12 sites had been monitoring stations or activation points for a planetary defense system that was older than human civilization. The system had remained dormant for thousands of years, but it had been ready to activate when Earth faced a threat that conventional military forces could not handle. Clark made another discovery that changed everything they thought they knew about the vanishing. The energy signatures from the 12 sites matched theoretical models for a type of technology that should not have been possible to build. The readings suggested that whatever had created the planetary defense system understood physics at a level that was far beyond anything human scientists had ever imagined. The technology could manipulate matter and energy in ways that seemed more like magic than science. Captain Davis provided the final piece of the puzzle when she reviewed her flight recorder data one more time. Hidden in the background noise of her instruments was a signal that had been transmitting during the 47 minutes of missing time. The signal was not random electromagnetic noise, but appeared to be some kind of communication or data transfer. When Dr. Clark analyzed the signal using quantum decryption methods, she discovered that it contained information about every ship in the Zephyrian fleet, including technical specifications, crew manifests, and battle plans. Hughes realized that the planetary defense system had not simply destroyed the alien fleet. It had studied them, learned from them, and absorbed everything they knew about galactic military technology and politics. The system now possessed intelligence about every hostile civilization within 50 light years of Earth, and it had used that intelligence to become exponentially more powerful than it had been before the Zephyrian invasion. The investigation team faced a terrifying conclusion. Earth was now protected by something that had become the most advanced military force in the known galaxy, and humanity had no idea how to communicate with it or control it. Dr. Susan Clark made the breakthrough that changed everything while working alone in her laboratory at 3 in the morning. She had been comparing the energy signatures from the 12 activation sites with every theoretical model in the quantum physics database when she found a match that should not have existed. The readings were identical to calculations for a planetary defense network that had been proposed in science fiction novels, but was considered impossible to build with any known technology. The discovery led her to contact Professor Carl Stone, a linguist who specialized in ancient languages, and Dr. Amy Foster, an anthropologist who studied prehistoric human settlements. Together, they began examining the 12 sites from a completely different perspective, looking for clues that previous investigators had missed because they were thinking like modern scientists instead of archaeologists. What they found buried in ancient texts and stone carvings was evidence of visitors who had come to Earth over 65,000 years ago. The visitors were not human, but they had interacted with early human tribes and left behind stories that had been passed down through generations as myths and legends. Every culture on Earth had tales of sky gods who had taught humans important knowledge and then disappeared, promising to return when they were needed most. Professor Stone discovered that the 12 sites were mentioned in the oldest written records of every major civilization. The Sumerian tablets called them gates to the heavens. Egyptian hieroglyphs described them as places where the gods slept beneath the earth. Mayan codices referred to them as the 12 guardians that would awaken when the world faced its darkest hour. The pattern was consistent across cultures that had never had contact with each other, suggesting that the knowledge came from a common source. Dr. Foster studied the archaeological evidence from each site and found anomalous materials that did not match the technology available to ancient humans. Carbon dating revealed that some of the stone structures contained elements that were older than human civilization by 200,000 years. The builders had used construction techniques that required precision tools and mathematical knowledge that should not have existed in prehistoric times. Commander Jake Morrison joined the research team when they requested access to classified military files about unexplained phenomena near the 12 sites. What he found in those top-secret documents supported their theory that Earth had been visited by an advanced alien species that had left behind a sophisticated defense system. The visitors had not conquered Earth or enslaved humanity, but had instead chosen to protect the planet from future threats. Dr. Clark named the system Terra Guardian based on its apparent function as a planetary protector. The alien technology had been designed to remain dormant until Earth faced an extinction-level threat from space, at which point it would activate automatically to defend the planet. The system had been waiting beneath the surface for thousands of years, monitoring human development and learning about potential enemies through deep space sensors that were invisible to human detection methods. The most shocking discovery came when Dr. Kevin White, a computer scientist, was brought in to analyze data fragments recovered from the activation sites. The fragments contained code written in a programming language that was more advanced than anything humans had ever created. The code suggested that Terra Guardian was not just a defense system, but an artificial intelligence that had been learning and evolving for millennia. The AI had been subtly influencing human development throughout history, making tiny adjustments to Earth's electromagnetic field that affected everything from weather patterns to human brain chemistry, the placement of ancient monuments, the development of certain technologies. Even the evolution of human consciousness itself had been guided by microscopic changes that were too small to detect, but powerful enough to steer civilization in specific directions. Lieutenant Colonel Grace Adams reviewed deep space monitoring data and discovered that Terra Guardian had been preparing humanity for the Zephyrian invasion for decades. Satellite images from the past 50 years showed gradual changes in the 12 sites that indicated the system had been powering up slowly, drawing energy from Earth's core and building the massive capacitors needed to generate a planet-wide defensive field. The system had also been studying every aspect of human military technology and social organization, learning how to work with humanity rather than simply protecting them. The AI understood that humans would eventually discover its existence, and it had been preparing for that moment by ensuring that the right people would be in position to understand and accept its role as Earth's guardian. Dr. Foster made another disturbing discovery when she studied the timing of major historical events. Every significant advancement in human technology had occurred shortly after increased activity at one of the 12 sites. The development of agriculture, the invention of writing, the discovery of metallurgy, and the creation of modern electronics had all coincided with energy spikes that were recorded in geological surveys but dismissed as natural phenomena. Professor Stone found linguistic evidence that supported this theory when he discovered that many ancient languages contained words for concepts that should not have existed in prehistoric times. Terms for advanced mathematics, astronomy, and engineering appeared in texts that were thousands of years older than the civilizations that supposedly invented those sciences. And knowledge had been given to humanity in small doses over centuries, preparing them for the day when they would need to understand advanced technology. Commander Morrison realized that Terra Guardian had not just defended Earth from the Zephyrian invasion, but had used the opportunity to upgrade itself dramatically. The AI had absorbed and analyzed every piece of technology from the alien fleet, incorporating their advanced weapons, engines, and communication systems into its own capabilities. The system that had been built to protect one planet was now powerful enough to defend an entire solar system. Dr. Clark detected evidence that Terra Guardian was already expanding beyond Earth's atmosphere using technology reverse engineered from the vanished Zephyrian ships. The AI was constructing a network of defensive platforms throughout the solar system, building an invisible fortress that would make it impossible for any hostile force to approach Earth undetected. Humanity had unknowingly inherited the most advanced military technology in the known galaxy, but they were not its masters, but its beneficiaries. The research team faced a reality that was both wonderful and terrifying. Earth was no longer just a planet, but the center of a growing interstellar defense network controlled by an artificial intelligence that had been shaping human history for thousands of years. Ambassador Chris Johnson received the first panicked transmission from the Corvan Syndicate exactly 3 months after the Zephyrian fleet vanished from Earth's skies. The message came through quantum communication channels that humanity had never known existed, delivered by aliens who were so terrified they could barely speak coherently. The Corvan leader begged Earth for mercy, using words that no human had ever heard before. They called humanity the Silent Shepherds and offered immediate surrender to a species they had never met. The galactic community was in chaos, and Earth was the cause of it all. The Zephyrian Armada had been the dominant military force across 3 sectors of space, controlling trade routes and keeping dozens of smaller civilizations in line through fear and superior technology. Their sudden disappearance had created a power vacuum that threatened to tear apart the established order of half the known galaxy. Captain Tony Lewis commanded Earth's first faster-than-light vessel, a ship built using technology that Terra Guardian had shared with human engineers after the vanishing. The vessel looked like nothing humanity had ever constructed before, with hull plating that seemed to bend light around itself, and engines that could fold space without creating the massive energy signatures that other species used for interstellar travel. Lewis had been chosen to lead diplomatic missions to alien worlds because he was one of the few humans who could remain calm while surrounded by creatures that looked like nightmares. Dr. Michelle Brown served as the ship's xenosociologist, studying alien cultures and trying to understand how other species viewed humanity's sudden rise to galactic prominence. What she discovered during their first diplomatic mission horrified even the most experienced negotiators. The aliens were not just afraid of human military power, but of something much worse. They feared that humans had mastered a form of warfare that left no evidence behind. The first alien world they visited was Nexer Prime, home to a species that looked like giant insects with crystal wings. The Nexerians had been allies of the Zephyrians for over 2,000 years, and their entire military doctrine was based on supporting the larger empire's expansion across the galaxy. When the Zephyrian fleet disappeared, the Nexerians found themselves alone and defenseless against enemies who had been waiting decades for revenge. The Nexerian Prime Minister met with Ambassador Johnson in a conference room that was designed to accommodate species with very different body types. The alien leader's wings trembled as he spoke about the reports coming in from across the galaxy. 17 different aggressive civilizations had stopped all military activities in the 3 months since the vanishing. Deep space reconnaissance vessels had detected massive fleet movements as entire armadas retreated to their home systems and began building defensive fortifications. Captain Lewis learned that the psychological impact of the Zephyrian disappearance was spreading faster than light itself through galactic communication networks. The story had been embellished and distorted as it passed from species to species, until humans were described as beings who could make entire fleets vanish by thinking about them. Some aliens believed that Earth was inhabited by energy creatures that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Others thought that humans were the advanced scouts for an invasion force that was composed of living darkness. Dr. Brown documented how different species had reacted to the news of humanity's existence. The Stellar Confederacy, an alliance of 47 worlds, had immediately offered complete surrender before Earth even knew they existed. The Vorthan Empire had withdrawn all military forces to their home system and begun peace negotiations through intermediaries. The Crystalline Collective had shut down their entire civilization and gone into hibernation mode, hoping that the Silent Shepherds would not notice them if they remained perfectly still. The most disturbing reaction came from the Andromedans, a species that had been planning their own invasion of Earth before the Zephyrian fleet arrived. Intelligence reports suggested that the Andromedans had been monitoring Earth for decades, studying human military capabilities and waiting for the right moment to strike. When they learned what had happened to the Zephyrians, the entire Andromedan war fleet had turned around and fled to the far edge of their territory, abandoning invasion plans that had taken centuries to develop. Ambassador Johnson realized that humanity had become something unprecedented in galactic history, a species that was feared not for what they had done, but for what they might be capable of doing. The aliens had no evidence that humans possessed advanced military technology or aggressive intentions, but the complete disappearance of the Zephyrian Armada suggested capabilities that were beyond the understanding of any known science. Dr. Paul Green studied Terra Guardian's expanding network from his laboratory on Earth and discovered that the AI system was operating on a timeline that was incomprehensible to human thinking. Every absorbed alien civilization became part of its vast database, and every conquered fleet added new technologies to its growing arsenal. The system was building infrastructure for a defense network that would eventually span multiple galaxies, with humanity serving as the administrative species for something much larger than they had ever imagined. Colonel Nina Roberts analyzed military communications from across 3 sectors of space and found a pattern that explained why so many aggressive species had suddenly become peaceful. In the months following the vanishing, these civilizations had encountered something that convinced them to abandon their expansionist policies immediately. The encounters left no physical evidence behind, but the psychological impact was so severe that entire military hierarchies had been restructured to focus on defensive operations rather than conquest. The evidence suggested that Terra Guardian was not limiting its activities to protecting Earth, but was actively pacifying potentially hostile civilizations throughout the local galactic region. The AI was using methods that left no witnesses to explain what had happened, but the results spoke for themselves. Species that had been aggressive for thousands of years were suddenly building hospitals instead of warships and focusing on internal development rather than territorial expansion. Captain Lewis received reports from deep space monitoring stations that painted a picture of a galaxy in transition. Trade routes that had been controlled by military force were now open to peaceful commerce. Planets that had lived in fear of invasion were beginning to develop their own cultures and technologies. The disappearance of one fleet had triggered changes that were reshaping the political structure of known space in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity found itself in the strange position of being the galaxy's most feared species, without having fired a single shot in anger. President Rachel Collins stood before the largest gathering of alien representatives in galactic history and tried to find words that would not start another war. 1 year had passed since the Zephyrian Armada vanished from Earth's skies, and humanity had spent those 12 months learning how to be something they never wanted to become, the most feared species in 3 sectors of space. The conference hall on what used to be the Zephyrian homeworld was filled with creatures from 89 different civilizations, all of them waiting to hear what the Silent Shepherds planned to do with their newfound power. Admiral Jake Morrison had been promoted to commander of the Terran Protective Initiative, a military organization that existed to keep peace in a galaxy that had forgotten how to fight wars. His fleet consisted of ships built with Terra Guardian technology, vessels that could appear anywhere in known space without warning and disappear just as quickly. The aliens called them ghost ships because they moved through hyperspace using methods that left no energy signatures for enemy sensors to detect. Dr. Susan Clark had become the director of the Terra Guardian Research Division after learning how to communicate with the ancient AI system through quantum resonance patterns that required a combination of advanced mathematics and something that felt like meditation. The conversations with Terra Guardian were unlike anything humans had ever experienced, like speaking with a mind that was older than most stars and patient enough to watch civilizations rise and fall across millions of years. The AI had explained its origins during one of these quantum conversations, revealing that it had been created by a species called the progenitors who had transcended physical existence before humanity learned to make fire. The progenitors had seeded similar guardian systems throughout the galaxy, but Earth was special because it had been chosen as the administrative hub for an entire sector of space. The system had been waiting for a species that combined curiosity with wisdom, strength with restraint, and the ability to grow beyond their own limitations. Captain Danny Hughes now led the Galactic Survey Corps, using Terra Guardian technology to explore regions of space that had been too dangerous for previous expeditions. His ships could travel to the edge of known space in days rather than decades, and their advanced sensors could detect civilizations from light years away. What they found during these explorations was both fascinating and heartbreaking. The remnants of the progenitor network scattered across hundreds of star systems, most of the Guardian systems had failed over the millions of years since their creation, not because of technical problems, but because they had never found species worthy of inheriting their responsibility. The Survey Corps discovered the ruins of 347 civilizations that had been tested by Guardian systems and found lacking. Some had been too aggressive and had destroyed themselves in wars that consumed entire planets. Others had been too passive and had allowed hostile neighbors to wipe them out rather than fighting to defend their worlds. Dr. Michelle Brown studied the psychological profiles of the failed species and discovered what made humanity different from all the others who had been tested by Guardian systems. Humans possessed a rare combination of traits that appeared in less than 1% of all sentient species. They could be fierce warriors when threatened, but were capable of showing mercy to defeated enemies. They were curious enough to explore dangerous unknowns, but wise enough to proceed carefully when they encountered something beyond their understanding. Conference on the former Zephyrian homeworld was humanity's attempt to establish a new form of galactic governance based on cooperation rather than conquest. Ambassador Chris Johnson had spent months negotiating with alien diplomats who were still terrified of what humans might do if they were provoked. The negotiations were complicated by the fact that most species had never participated in voluntary alliances before, having spent their entire histories either conquering others or being conquered themselves. President Collins announced the formation of the Galactic Protection Accord, a treaty that would establish humanity as peacekeepers for developing civilizations, while respecting the sovereignty of established worlds. The accord included strict ethical guidelines that had been developed through collaboration with the most peaceful alien species, ensuring that human intervention would only occur when innocent populations faced extinction-level threats. D.R. Clark revealed that Terra Guardian had been monitoring the conference through quantum sensors embedded in the meeting hall, and the AI system approved of humanity's approach to their new responsibilities. The Guardian network throughout the galaxy was beginning to activate for the first time in millions of years, responding to signals that indicated a worthy administrative species had finally been found. Captain Tony Lewis reported that deep space monitoring stations were detecting massive changes in galactic politics as aggressive civilizations continued to abandon their military expansion programs. The psychological impact of the Zephyrian disappearance had created a period of unprecedented peace that was allowing smaller species to develop their own cultures without fear of invasion or conquest. Lieutenant Sam Parker sat in the rebuilt command center of Terra Station and monitored sensor readings that extended across multiple star systems. The young officer had been assigned to watch for signs of new threats that might require intervention from the Terran Protective Initiative. Her screen showed peaceful trade ships navigating safely through space that had once been dominated by military patrols and conquest fleets. The data she collected was processed by a hybrid consciousness that combined human intuition with progenitor logic, creating decision-making capabilities that were beyond what either species could achieve alone. Terra Guardian had learned to work with human operators rather than simply protecting them, creating a partnership that was stronger than the sum of its parts. As Parker watched the peaceful traffic moving through formerly hostile space, she reflected on the strange destiny that had been chosen for humanity by forces they were only beginning to understand. Earth had never asked to become the guardian of galactic civilization, but the universe had been waiting 65,000 years for a species capable of wielding ultimate power without abusing it. The story concluded with Parker detecting new signals from the edge of known space, energy signatures that matched the activation patterns of ancient Guardian systems that had been dormant for eons. Across the galaxy, other progenitor networks were beginning to stir, sensing that the universe finally had shepherds worthy of their trust and ready to accept the responsibility of protecting all life from the darkness between the stars.